The courtroom was wrapped in a heavy, almost suffocating silence. Every seat was filled, every eye forward, waiting for what the judge would reveal next. Then, in a moment no one expected, the room shifted. Every head turned as a familiar figure walked slowly toward the witness stand. It was Usher Raymond, the Grammy-winning R&B sensation, known for his iconic voice and stage charisma, was not there to sing, not there to talk about music labels, awards, or tours. He was there to testify. And not about industry rumors or vague allegations, but about what happened behind the closed doors of one of the most powerful figures in the music world, Sean "Diddy" Combs. For decades, Usher had remained silent. He smiled through interviews, nodded through questions, and buried the truth behind polished charm. But today, as Diddy faced serious federal charges, ranging from human trafficking to coercion and leading a criminal enterprise, Usher had chosen to break his silence. Truth, he said, had been burning a hole in his soul for years. He began by taking the court back to the beginning. He was only 14. His debut album had just dropped, and with stars in his eyes, he believed he was stepping into the dream life. L.A. Reid had arranged for Usher to live in New York under the mentorship of Diddy, a golden opportunity, or so it seemed. "I thought I was going to learn how to be a star," Usher said, his voice calm but tight with emotion. "But what I saw instead, no teenager should be around that." He described his first steps into Diddy's Midtown Manhattan penthouse. It wasn't a home, it was a scene. Champagne bottles littered breakfast trays. Strangers lounged on furniture, half-dressed, some unconscious. The air was thick with the energy of indulgence, power, and secrecy. "They called it Flavor Camp," Usher recalled. "I thought it was just a cool brand name. Later I learned it was something else, something darker." In that single moment, the courtroom no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like a place where buried truths were clawing their way into the light. And Usher, once the boy who smiled through it all, had finally begun to speak. As Usher continued, the silence in the courtroom deepened. Every word he spoke peeled back a layer of the glossy image the industry had painted over the years. He explained that from the very beginning, the mentorship wasn't what he had been led to expect. There were no lessons in vocal technique, no studio sessions where he learned how to command a stage. Instead, Diddy's world was about watching, imitating, and staying silent. "Diddy told me, this is how we do it. You don't ask, you just watch. Learn by watching. That's how grown men roll," Usher told the court. There was one night in particular that left a mark on him, one he never forgot. He said he woke up around 3 a.m., confused by the muffled sound of music echoing through the penthouse. As he crept through the hallway, he noticed dim candlelight flickering off the walls. Then he saw people in masks quietly moving into the living room. What he stumbled upon felt surreal. The gathering didn't look like a party. It looked ritualistic. It wasn't just about sex. There were cameras, there were lists, everyone had a role. No one looked surprised, not even the staff. "I thought maybe I had walked onto a movie set," Usher said, his voice thick. "I remember thinking, I shouldn't be seeing this." Someone told him to go back to bed. He did, but he didn't sleep. That night, something inside him shifted. He no longer saw Diddy as just a flashy mentor. The charm faded, the image cracked, and behind it, something darker began to show. But it wasn't just what he saw. It was what nobody ever warned him about. Not his record label, not his mother, not even the people who'd been in the industry for years. They all knew what his world really looked like, Usher said. They just didn't say anything. And for the first time, the jury began to understand. This wasn't just about one man's secrets. It was about a system that allowed those secrets to survive, in silence. The atmosphere in the courtroom turned heavier as Usher leaned into the microphone, recounting one of the most unsettling chapters of his story. He was 15 when Diddy invited him on what was described as a private retreat to the Caribbean. It was supposed to be a getaway, Usher said quietly. Just me, him, and a couple of others. No press, no cameras, just isolation. At first, he was excited. The idea of a luxurious trip with his mentor sounded like another step forward in his career. But what he walked into was far from educational or artistic. It felt more like a carefully staged isolation chamber, cut off from the outside world, from safety, from accountability. Usher paused before continuing. His voice dropped a little, laced with restraint and pain. I won't go into everything, but what I will say is that I wasn't given a choice about the environment I was placed in. That environment, he said, wasn't about music at all. When they returned to New York, the dynamic between Usher and Diddy had shifted completely. Diddy grew more controlling, more possessive of Usher's time, movements, and even thoughts. The penthouse saw an endless rotation of new people, more parties, more secrecy, and unspoken rules. Any time Usher hesitated or pushed back, the response was swift and psychological. He'd say, "You don't bite the hand that feeds you. Remember who gave you this life." Usher looked directly across the courtroom, locking eyes with Diddy. "No," he said, his voice rising with conviction. "You didn't give me this life. You gave me nightmares." There was no reaction from Diddy. No expression at all. But the rest of the courtroom sat frozen, stunned by what they were hearing. For the first time, the public could see the cost of fame through the eyes of a teenager who thought he was chasing his dreams, but was instead thrown into something much darker. And that dream, Usher implied, came with a debt he never signed up for. Usher took a deep breath before continuing. What he shared next wasn't just about betrayal. It was about being silenced, methodically and legally, before he was old enough to understand the weight of his own signature. He was 16 when he was presented with a contract. His label told him it was a standard non-disclosure agreement to protect the business dealings of Bad Boy Records. But as he sat in the courtroom now, decades later, Usher said it was far more than that. It wasn't just about protecting trade secrets, he explained. It had specific language about private events, about discretion, about things I wasn't even old enough to define. His mother had to co-sign. Lawyers reassured them it was routine. I trusted them, Usher said softly. That signature bought my silence for years. He wasn't allowed to talk about the parties, the guests, the bizarre behaviors he witnessed. Any attempt to open up, especially in interviews, was met with reminders. Legal calls, veiled threats. In 2009, I was preparing to do an interview, he told the court. The questions started to get personal. Then I got a call from Bad Boy's old legal team. They said, "We hope you're not trying to jeopardize your reputation." He canceled the interview. But it wasn't just lawyers, Usher explained. It was people, connected people who hadn't spoken to him in years, suddenly reaching out with thinly veiled warnings. You think you've left that world, he said. But that world doesn't leave you. He glanced at the jury. And if you step out of line, there are consequences, not just for your career, but for your safety. Then quietly, Usher pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the NDA. The judge allowed it to be entered into evidence. Usher pointed to the section outlining audio-visual documentation and unauthorized reproduction, phrases that, now in light of the allegations about Diddy's so-called freak-off video library, took on an ominous new meaning. That document made me feel like I was crazy, Usher said, voice cracking, like everything I saw, everything I felt wasn't real, because I wasn't allowed to say it out loud. The courtroom didn't make a sound. A piece of paper had held a teenage boy's voice hostage for years, and now, finally, he was reclaiming. Usher's voice dropped lower now, but his words carried even more weight as he turned to an event he had kept buried for years, a moment that would reshape everything he believed about his mentor, about fame, and about safety. He was 17. It was 1996. Diddy had invited him to an exclusive party at a mansion in Atlanta. The invitation came without detail, only the promise of a glamorous evening with major industry names. Usher assumed it was a networking event, another step in building his future. It wasn't like any party I'd ever been to, he told the court. The house was massive, white marble floors, guards at every door, a DJ spinning all night. But what stood out wasn't the wealth, it was the secrecy. At one point, Usher said, he noticed Diddy whispering to a security guard who then opened a locked door at the back of the mansion. As Usher moved closer, curious, Diddy turned to him and smiled. "You're not ready for that yet," he said. Usher paused on the witness stand. But I looked anyway. What he saw he couldn't fully explain. People in masks. Movements that didn't make sense. A feeling that chilled him to his core. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew I wasn't supposed to see it. That night marked a turning point. It was no longer just confusion, it was fear. Fear of what was behind the fame. Fear of who was really in control. To cope, Usher said he started keeping a journal. At first it was meant for writing lyrics and collecting thoughts. But as the months passed, it became something else. A vault for memories he couldn't share. A hidden witness to everything he'd experienced. He held up photocopies of several pages in court. One entry from March 1999 read, "Had dinner with Diddy and 3 execs I didn't know. They kept talking about loyalty, said, loyalty keeps you on tour, honesty puts you back home." Diddy laughed. Another entry, dated October 2000, described an invitation he turned down. Too many secrets, too many masks. Diddy says it's just the culture. I don't agree. The prosecutor asked if he had ever shown the journal to anyone. Usher shook his head. I was afraid of losing everything. And honestly, I didn't think anyone would believe me. And then, in a moment that stunned even the most seasoned court officials, he added, I'm only sharing it now because I've lived with this long enough, and it's time the truth comes out. By now, the courtroom had become a place where time felt suspended, where truth, long suppressed, hung in the air like heavy smoke. And then came the moment that left even the most prepared legal teams visibly unsettled. Usher leaned forward and shared something he said he hadn't even told his closest friends. It was 1997. He was 18. Diddy had invited him to Miami to meet a major music investor, someone Usher was told who could fund his first world tour and help turn his budding career into a global brand. I thought it was business, Usher said. Diddy hyped it up, told me to dress sharp, be polite, said this guy could change my life. Usher arrived at the penthouse suite at the Setai Hotel expecting a formal meeting. But what he walked into felt more like a private club behind a kirai curtain. There were 3 men lounging in robes, expensive champagne. Young women sitting quietly in the background, he said. One of the men, foreign, smooth-voiced, asked Usher if he wanted to be remembered forever. But he wasn't talking about music, Usher said flatly. Then came the moment that still haunted him. Diddy left the room. Just walked out. Left Usher alone with the men. I felt trapped, Usher said. They didn't touch me, but one of them put a hand on my shoulder and said, you can stay or you can leave, but you'll never get another invitation like this again. Usher left. He didn't look back. He didn't speak a word about it. But something changed after that night, and not just inside him. He said he was suddenly removed from a planned tour. A producer he was set to work with pulled out, offering no explanation. No one ever said, it was because I left that suite, Usher explained. But after that night, doors that had always been open just slammed shut. Then came another shock. A few weeks later, Diddy showed Usher a clip from a handheld camera. He laughed as he played it, Usher said. It was of another young artist, doing something I know he wouldn't have agreed to unless someone made him. Did Diddy threaten you? The attorney asked. Usher hesitated. He didn't have to, he said. The people around him did. They didn't use words, they used silence. And exile. That's when Usher said he realized something terrifying. Talent wasn't the currency in Diddy's world. Submission was, he said. That's how you stayed famous. And just like that, the idea of music, the joy of it, the promise of it, felt like it had been traded away for survival. The room seemed to darken as Usher's voice shifted from calm recollection to something closer to disbelief, a haunting mix of memory and realization. He recalled sitting with Diddy a few weeks after the Miami incident, when Diddy pulled out a handheld camera and queued up a video clip. He was laughing, Usher told the court. He played it like it was a joke. But what I saw, it wasn't funny. On the screen was another young artist, someone Usher knew, caught in an intimate act that Usher was certain had not been consensual. Not really. He wouldn't have done that unless someone made him, Usher said. The courtroom went dead silent. The prosecutor asked the question everyone was thinking. Did Diddy threaten you? Usher paused. His jaw tightened. Then he replied, slowly, no. He didn't need to. The people around him did. The threats weren't direct. They were quieter, but more chilling. He spoke about the invisible mechanisms of control that surrounded Diddy's empire, the unspoken rules, the eyes that watched, the doors that closed if you said the wrong thing, or if you tried to leave. They used silence and exile, Usher said. They didn't need to say anything, you just knew. He looked at the jury and added, that's when I realized fame wasn't about music anymore. Not in his world. It was about submission. That's how you survived. That's how you stayed visible. That's how you kept getting invited back. The talent was never enough. The system wasn't built to protect the artist. It was built to mold them and then to discard them once they stopped obeying. The courtroom could barely process what it was hearing. And Usher? He wasn't done. Usher took a breath, steadying himself as the courtroom listened in stunned silence. What came next wasn't just personal, it was a warning. A reckoning with the guilt of watching the same story unfold all over again. But this time, not to him. He began speaking about the early days of Justin Bieber's career, how he had taken the young Canadian under his wing, offering the mentorship he himself had once longed for. At the start, I just wanted to be a big brother, Usher said. I wanted to protect him from the things I had seen and been through. But then Diddy entered the picture. According to Usher, Diddy started inviting Bieber to exclusive parties. He used the same phrase he once used with Usher years earlier, flavor. Camp, he was 15, Usher said, his voice strained. And they were treating him like a grown man. One night in 2011, Usher said, he got a phone call from Bieber. At first there was nothing, just silence and shallow breathing on the other end. Then Bieber whispered, I want to come home. Usher's team scrambled to locate him, but Bieber went silent for 2 days. When they finally met again, something had changed. He wouldn't look me in the eye, Usher said. All he said was, it's fine, I'm good now. But he wasn't. Usher revealed that he later confronted Diddy privately. He asked him directly, what are you doing to these kids? Diddy laughed. Same thing they did to me, he replied. It's how the game works. That, Usher said, was the last real conversation he ever had with Diddy. I pulled back after that. I didn't want my name tied to it, but watching what happened to Justin, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Then he dropped another revelation, one that chilled the courtroom. In 2018, Usher received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end said only one thing. Tell him to keep his mouth shut, or we'll shut it for him. Who, do you believe made that call? The prosecutor asked. Usher didn't blink. He turned his head slowly toward the defense table. I think you know. And in that moment it became painfully clear. This was no longer about one man's testimony. It was about an entire system that had turned silence into currency, and survival into submission. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Usher transitioned to what he called the breaking point, the night everything shattered for good. It was 2002. The event was described as a small, private gathering at a secluded estate in the Hollywood Hills. Usher had been told he was going to meet a promising European producer, someone Diddy claimed was essential for the next phase of his career. It sounded like business, Usher said. But what I walked into was something else entirely. From the moment he arrived, the energy felt wrong. There was no industry chatter, no music discussions, no producers. Just security guards stationed at every entrance, low lighting that cast shadows across the rooms, and a thick air of secrecy. The first thing taken from him at the door wasn't his coat, it was his phone. They said it was standard, Usher testified. Then they handed me a contract labeled NDA, but it wasn't like anything I'd seen before. The language was aggressive, controlling. It outlined not just confidentiality but restrictions on speaking, recording, leaving, even observing. It was more than legal protection. It felt like a trap. The vibe was wrong, Usher repeated. There were people there who weren't artists. They weren't producers. They weren't executives. He realized painfully that they were simply observers. As the night dragged on, he recognized several celebrities, faces the world had never connected publicly to Diddy, and still, Usher refused to name them in court. "I won't be the first to drag them into this," he said, "but if this trial continues, others will come forward." Then came the moment that haunted him most. After trying to quietly leave the party, he was intercepted by a man he didn't know. The man led him to a side room where Diddy was sitting alone. Diddy looked at him and said calmly, "You're not ready yet. You still think this is about music. This is bigger than that." Usher left that night, and he never went to another party hosted by Diddy again. That was the moment he chose distance, silence, survival. And though it would take years before he spoke out, the seed of truth had already taken root. Now it was finally beginning to bloom, in a courtroom filled with stunned faces and a world that could no longer pretend not to see. By now, the courtroom wasn't just listening. They were absorbing a masterclass in how power, fame, and silence intertwine in the music industry. But Usher wasn't done. His voice hardened slightly as he shifted to the part of his testimony that struck a different chord: the business. He told the court that long before he understood what was happening, behind closed doors he had already been locked into a development deal with Bad Boy Records. He was just a teenager when he signed, young, hungry, and trusting. "I didn't know what I was signing," Usher said. "I just wanted to sing." The contract bound him for 5 full albums and included a shocking clause. He would not own the rights to his masters until he turned 35. That meant every song, every performance, every recording belonged to someone else, and he wasn't the only one. Usher presented internal emails and early drafts of contracts to the court. He revealed that other artists had signed similar deals. He named names: Carl Thomas, Total, Black Rob, the late Craig Mack. They were promised mentorship, exposure, careers, Usher said. But once they weren't useful or stopped obeying, they were discarded. Usher paused, then said something that caused murmurs in the courtroom. "A private accountant once showed me a spreadsheet. It listed the royalties I'd missed over the years. It totaled over $4.3 million. He looked across the room. When I brought it to Diddy, he laughed. He said, "If you knew what was really owed to you, you wouldn't sleep at night." Usher described artists who took small settlements, crumbs, to regain the right to perform their own music or use their names again. He revealed that in 2011 he had tried to organize a private meeting with several other Bad Boy artists. The purpose? To finally speak freely, to share what they'd experienced, to compare contracts, to push back. The meeting never happened. "Someone tipped Diddy off," Usher said. "It was canceled before it even began." Then came one of the most disturbing revelations of the day. Usher said he once saw Diddy order the destruction of demo tapes and footage belonging to an artist who had threatened to go public. That artist vanished from public life after that, Usher said. "I don't know where he is. Nobody does. But I remember his voice, and I remember that he was scared." And just like that, the courtroom fell into another long, stunned silence. This wasn't just about trauma anymore. This was about erasure. Usher's voice softened as he transitioned into the most personal chapter of his testimony. What followed wasn't about contracts, parties, or threats. It was about the long-term damage, the internal war that fame had hidden from the public eye for years. He described the moment the weight of everything finally broke him. It was 2001. Usher had just released his chart-topping album 8701. To the world, he was a superstar, on tour, in interviews, on magazine covers. But behind the scenes, he had vanished. "For 1 full week, I disappeared," he admitted. Industry insiders speculated it was a break from touring, exhaustion, or media fatigue. But the truth Usher revealed was much darker. I was checked into a private mental health facility in Northern California under a false name. He said the breakdown came suddenly, triggered by a night in New York at a luxury hotel, a building that years ago had hosted one of Diddy's infamous parties. I walked into the hallway, and I smelled the same candles he used to burn. My whole body froze. I couldn't breathe. His team rushed him to the clinic. He stayed for 5 days under psychiatric observation. I told the in-house psychiatrist things I had never said out loud, Usher said. I told him I saw things no kid should ever see, that I had learned to smile to survive. That house, Diddy's penthouse, wasn't just a home. It was, in Usher's words, a place where dreams were sold, but your soul was the price. The psychiatrist diagnosed him with PTSD. The revelation landed like thunder in the courtroom. A man idolized by millions had lived with the invisible scars of trauma, hidden behind platinum records and standing ovations. Usher said it took nearly 2 years of therapy before he could sleep through the night without waking up from nightmares. And yet he wasn't the only one. There were others, he said. Other young artists, some of them vanished, some had breakdowns, some didn't make it. He mentioned one who had overdosed, another who had attempted to take his own life, a third, just gone, with no trace. I was lucky, Usher said. I had the money to get help. Some of them didn't. Then the prosecutor asked him what so many were wondering. Why did you keep this secret for over 2 decades? Usher didn't flinch. Because nobody would have believed me in 2001, he said. Back then, Puffy was untouchable, and I was just the kid with the voice. He looked toward the press box, the cameras, the crowd behind the glass. But now the world is ready to listen. As Usher neared the end of his testimony, the weight of everything he had shared seemed to settle over the courtroom like a dense fog. But there was still one final truth he had to confront. The guilt, the silence, the question that had haunted him the most. Why didn't you come forward earlier? The prosecutor asked, gently. Usher looked down for a moment, then back up, his voice quiet, but clear. Because I thought I owed him. I thought staying silent was the price I had to pay for the life I was given. I thought, if I could just be grateful, I could move on. He paused. A long silence filled the courtroom. But you can't be grateful for a lie, he admitted. The guilt had followed him for years. Watching other young artists fall into the same traps he once did, knowing what was happening but feeling powerless to stop it. For a long time, I didn't know how to help them without destroying myself. He spoke of leverage, how Diddy always had it, and how the industry, knowingly or not, enabled it. Usher revealed that in 2016, around the time an infamous Drink Champs clip began recirculating online, he tried once more to confront Diddy directly. He never got the chance. His legal team blocked me before I even got close. But it was one specific journal entry, one that had never been published or spoken aloud, that truly encapsulated the pain he carried. The night he left Diddy's mentorship for good, he wrote, I survived Puffy, but did the kid in me survive? I still don't know. Then, Usher turned to address the court. Not just the judge, jury, and attorneys, but the unseen audience watching online, the victims who never got to speak, and the young artists still chasing dreams in an industry built on illusions. This isn't just about one man. It's about a system that told kids like me to be quiet, to stay in line, to never question the hands that fed us. His voice broke slightly. But I'm here now, and I'm not afraid anymore. Not for me. Because I already lived through it. I'm doing this for the ones who didn't. For a full minute, no one moved. No one spoke. What had started as a federal case about racketeering and trafficking had transformed into something bigger, a reckoning, a truth too long buried, a voice too long silenced. And now, finally, the silence had ended.